She's in her 30s and doesn't have any friends or relationships. Every day, she repeats a solitary life of 2 points in one line. Playing with her mobile phone is her favorite hobby. The sound from her headphones cuts out everything around her. Even if a neighbor greets her, she pretends not to hear them. She doesn't want to interact with strangers, and she doesn't want anyone to intrude into her closed life. When she got home, she ate cheap takeaway food, while watching cheesy variety shows to find happiness. Suddenly the house shook violently. Suji didn't think much of it and kept eating, as long as it wasn't the end of the world. Nothing outside the house seemed to matter to her. Half a month later, Suji went out and smelled a rotten odor. She called the property to complain that her life had been affected. After work that night, she saw some policemen coming from the building. She learned from the landlord that living next door was also a single person in her 30s. She was crushed to death by the collapsed cabinet. The time of death was about half a month ago. Suji suddenly realized. That night, the house shook, which could be the reason for it. She blamed herself a little. If she had gone out to find out what was going on, she could have saved a life. At the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of helplessness and sadness. If she had been the one crushed under the cupboard, perhaps she will also have this result. Suji's job is at telephone customer service. He sells products and provides after-sales service. He doesn't answer with any emotion or feeling, but this kind of work is like a robot. She became more and more numb to life. One day, the boss suddenly gave her a task. He asked her to take care of the new trainee. Suji subconsciously refused, because she had almost forgotten how to communicate with people face to face. But because he was the best customer service agent in the department, so she had to say yes. The new intern is a young girl. She had a childlike innocence and enthusiasm in her eyes. Suji, on the other hand, looked impatient and disgusted. She told her to just follow the employee handbook. Subsequently, Suji began her work. She completely ignored the intern. The bored intern can only kill time by herself, perhaps sensing Suji's dislike for her. In the afternoon at work, the girl took the initiative to talk to Suji, but Suji was as indifferent as ever. The girl began to listen carefully to Suji's conversations with clients. Suji is just answering various questions like a robot. She told the intern to try to say what the client likes to hear. That way, there wouldn't be any unnecessary trouble. The next day at work, the girl brought a new gift. This is a bottle of throat moisturizing spray. She said she might need it for this job. Suji put it on his desk without any interest. The girl enthusiastically invited him to try it. When the two were pushing and shoving, they accidentally sprayed the potion on Suji's face. This time, she finally couldn't help it anymore. To express her apology, the girl wanted to invite Suji to lunch. Suji went to the restaurant with the girl, but she didn't accept her offer or order for her. After ordering herself, she told the girl to eat her own food. Then she left without looking back. She didn't choose a spacious table. To avoid the girl, she deliberately sat in a crowded place. At work in the afternoon, the girl tried to answer the phone for the first time, but she didn't know what to do when faced with a difficult customer. Suji reminded her to apologize to the client, but the girl refused to speak. The girl thought, why should she apologize when she had done nothing wrong? Eventually, the customer called the complaint line. They were called into the office and reprimanded. The leader just told the interns to pay more attention in the future. Instead, he pointed the finger at Suji. Why did she let her make such a cheap mistake? Suji felt a sense of grievance. She was doing a good job. Why did you have to give me this kind of job? After work, her father suddenly called and asked her to come home to sign an agreement. When her mother died, she left behind a house. It was written in the will that Suji would inherit it. But her father told her there were only two choices. Either come back and live with me, or give up her right to inherit the house. Suji didn't hesitate. She signed the renunciation form. She'd rather live alone in a rented house than under the same roof with her father, because when she was very young, her father abandoned his wife and daughter and ran away. He grew up with his mother all these years. She has no feelings for her father, whom she hasn't seen in over 10 years. Or rather, she had never forgiven him in her heart. But she couldn't help but turn on the surveillance camera to observe her father's every move in the house. This is the camera she installed before to take care of her mother, but now it has become her only channel to get to know her father. Sometimes he sits alone in the house, lost in thought. Sometimes he cried as he touched his mother's portrait. Suji couldn't understand. Since he was so reluctant, why did he have to leave in the first place? That day after work, Suji met a man on crutches in front of her house. He was looking for an apartment, but she was curious why the room was so cheap. Suji answered honestly, "It's because someone in this room died recently." The next morning, Suji was awakened by a loud noise. The man who had asked her last night was moving in. When he saw Suji, he came to thank her. He invites Suji to his home for the evening. That day, the intern girl received a call from a mentally ill client, but she didn't just ignore it. She patiently listened to the caller's nonsense. It was at this moment Suji saw herself in the girl. At that time, she was also passionate. At that time, she listened to every phone call with all her heart. But the irony is that in return for her sincerity, she was at the bottom of the list every month, and was often complained about. Maybe having a friend like the intern girl wasn't such a bad thing, but when she went to work the next day, she learned that the girl had resigned. Suji suddenly felt empty. She is also absent-minded and frequently makes mistakes at work. Even the food she used to eat was bland and tasteless. In the evening after work, she wandered aimlessly through the noisy streets. It was as if she had been abandoned by the world. She was left alone with the shadows under the streetlights. When she came home, she found the door of her new neighbor's house open. The man was paying homage to his dead neighbor with his best friend. They've never met, but they're conveying their feelings in a special way. Suji, on the other hand, is deliberately rejecting everyone and everything around her. This avoidance is making her life worse. Then she closes her eyes in the doorway and feels the atmosphere of the house. She tried to find a trace of empathy with a stranger. It wasn't long before the man spotted Suji and warmly invited her in for dinner. This time, Suji didn't refuse. She stood and chatted with the man. That night, Suji's attitude towards people slowly changed. She took the initiative to dial the number of the intern girl. She told her sincerely, "I don't like eating alone, or taking the bus alone. I don't like living alone. I'm just pretending to be something I'm not." In the end, she apologized to the girl for her cold attitude. Unlike the apologies she used to make on the phone at work, this time her apology was very sincere.
못 챙겨줘서 미안해요. 내가 잘못했어요.
When she woke up the next day, she decided to change her lifestyle. She opened the curtains that had been closed for years. The dark room was instantly illuminated. She resigned from her job. She officially said goodbye to this numbing job. She didn't have any plans for the future. She suddenly thought of her father, who also lived alone. Then, for the first time, she calmly dialed his number. She said some inexplicable things to her father. Father listened in a daze and didn't know why. After hanging up, Suji changed the number to her father. Years of emotional entanglement can also be released at this moment. She began to reconcile with the past, reconcile with herself, and accept a new life. This is a dull story, but the film is like a mirror reflecting a special emotion buried deep in the hearts of many people. The information age has brought people closer to each other, but it has alienated the collision between the soul and the heart. Only by finding a balance between the two can one enjoy high-quality solitude.